I feel like there's something a little bit off with today's camera angle. I'm sorry if there is. You know, it's a little bit later in the day. It's a little bit later than I normally record, so the sun's probably going to start peeking up. In fact, I can kind of see it right here, so just, I suppose, keep an eye on the bird. Sun's going to come up a little bit since it's like 5:30, sunset soon. Anyways, kind of rambling, you know, a little bit late, but better late than never. Anyways, what's up, guys? Welcome to Friday's upload. I do have an RU match for you against YuseiTheSynchroHero. Really good match, if I do say so myself. It's a really good way to end up the, wrap up the week. And I figured we'll just go ahead and play it back right now. Okay, now looking at it, I do have the Archeops, and then I also got, you know, the other things. I have the Archeops and the Rotom, you know, and RU. I really like running those. And then I've been toying around with spinners, and I figured, you know, a lot of the spinners I'm using are actually weak to grass types. So I figured I'd slap along, you know, Bouffalant with the Sap Sipper, and then Sceptile with the ability to take on the water and grass hits somewhat well. And then, you know, I got Magmortar there just for Scarfer and whatnot. It looked decent when I slapped it together, and then it ended up actually being pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it. He's going to go ahead and lead off with Typhlosion. I'm going to go ahead and lead off with Archeops. Now, the problem here is I don't really have anything that wants to take an Eruption. You know, I'm not going to want to switch in on something, then let it die, and then switch out to something else. This is Scarf. So what I can do here is, because I do resist it, you know, I'm not as fragile. You know, I'm not going to get O-code by a fire move, so I figure the best thing to do right here is to go for the Endeavor, and however much HP he brings me down to, I can, you know, just dish it right back at him, you know, leave him with the same amount of HP. And now he's at 101 HP, and because of the base power drop thanks to Eruption's mechanics, he probably won't be able to take me out with the next one, so he decides to switch out, and I'm actually going to go ahead and go for the Acrobatics on the next one as opposed to another Endeavor. Maybe he was predicting that, you know, me going for another Endeavor with him going for another Eruption. That kind of makes sense. But, you know, after a Flight Gem boosted Acrobatics and then just a regular Acrobatics, you know, stab, whatnot, I did cripple his Typhlosion a little bit thanks to Endeavor, crippled his Golurk a little bit thanks to Acrobatics, and, you know, Archeops is the first one down. Sad to say that, but it actually did do a decent amount, given that I won't be taking Eruptions, you know, this entire time. But I bring in my Sand Slash because, you know, Golurk's a physical threat, Sand Slash is a physical wall. I can go ahead and set up my Stealth Rocks here, and I should be good to go. But he does predict my Stitch really nicely here and decides to go for the Sludge Bomb as opposed to the Sleep Powder or the Giga Drain like I was predicting. You know, if he's going to want to put something to sleep or to just go for the Stab move, you know, the Stab Grass move, he could do it there. I switched to this over Sceptile because my Sceptile is Specs, and I don't really have a lot of breathing room after I send it in. And when I send in Bouffalant, I can actually afford to mispredict a little bit like I did in that case, in case he did want to go for like Toxic Spikes or something like that, or something else. Whatever the case is, I'm actually still kind of in a good boat right now. Now, pay attention to the lefties order. He got his lefties first, so that means he goes first on this turn. So, he's going to go ahead and get his sub up right now, and those of you that are already kind of, you know, putting two and two together in your head as to why I'm, you know, telling you to pay attention to the lefties numbers, it's actually a speed tie. So I get my lefties first on this turn, he gets his lefties, which means I think that means I'm actually going to go first on the next turn, and then I do end up taking him out. So the order on that is a little bit weird. It probably means that I would have ended up taking an Earthquake otherwise. I don't really know what happened there, other than, you know, a speed tie. That's all that can really be explained for that. It was pretty cool though. So. In comes a Gallade. There was this string of matches I had been taking for like the past, you know, week before that, and Gallades would sub up on me. But, you know, Yusei just kind of breaks that, you know, breaks that chain along with every other bone in my body by giving me a stab close combat right to the face. You know, I don't have any chance of living that. You know, stab, life orb, super effective. I can put a shit ton of bulk, and I probably won't be able to take it at all. What I can do right now is I can go into Rotom. I don't know how fast he's going to be, but I'm pretty sure that Rotom is a little bit naturally faster anyway. So I'm going to go for the sub, expecting him not to want to take a Shadow Ball. He actually makes a ballsy play, stays in, decides to go for the Psycho Cut. Problem is now this has left me with a little bit less HP and a little bit more susceptible to be killed by a Shadow Sneak if he does have it, which he does. So this kind of scared me, but it does leave me at 12 HP. It's not Stab or anything like that, but it is boosted by Life Orb. If he is Jolly, if he was Adamant, that definitely would have killed. But it just ends up being a double down right now because I do take him out with my Ghost move, which happens to be Stab. So, double down, you know what they say about double downs. You bring in your Scarfer immediately after, which is what I do. I'm going to go ahead and bring in my Magmortar. Now, the problem with bringing it in now is I don't really have a lot to do Like, if I go for the flamethrower and I do end up taking this out, he can go into his Alamomola. If I go for the T-Bolt, he can go into his Roselia, I think that's what it's called. Problem is right here, I do take a Fire Blast, you know, not very nicely at all, but it does let him switch into Roselia immediately after. So right there was the point that I could have thought, what move do I want to go for so that way it can coax, you know, him to switch in something appropriately, because he knows that I'm Scarfed, you know, that kind of thing. So instead, he decides to bring in Mesprit. Now, this kind of surprises me, but I know that Mesprits tend to be Scarfed, so I'm going to go ahead and bring in Sandslash as Trick. You know, anything that Mesprit wants to do, if it wants a T-Wave, fine. If it wants a Stealth Rocks, I can Rapid Spin on the Switch. If it wants to Trick, I don't really want this thing getting tricked, but I would rather have this thing get tricked than anything else. But I think he just went for the Zen Headbutt, does a decent amount of damage. And I do have Super Fang on this thing, which is kind of good and kind of bad, you'll see. It's good here, and that I take off a lot of health off of this Alamomola, and if it keeps wanting to wish, I can keep Super Fanging, just keep doing that. I would have had an opportunity to set up my Stealth Rocks, but I already did set them up, so, you know, that kind of worked out, whatever. But for now, I'm going to go into my Sceptile, not really wanting to go into, I believe my Bouffalant died anyway, so go to my Sceptile, thankfully don't get the burn. But it does threaten him out because he's not going to want to take a Giga Drain or a Leaf Storm. I do run both of those on this guy. And I think I decided to go for the Leaf Storm right here just to do as much damage as possible to anything. Turns out he switches in his Mesprit, which probably would have died to this just because I'm Specs. But because I miss, he's able to go for the U-turn, get some damage off, and then he decides to go into his, I believe he goes into his Roselia now because it quad resists, it's got EV Light, it's got a great Spec D. You know, with EV Light, I suppose. I don't know if he is invested, you know, max HP, max Spec D. That's what I would assume, just based on how well he takes this. Look at how disgusting that is. That is pushing 20%, and yeah, it kind of sucks. But, and you know what, that was actually even an overgrow too, just look at that. Oh, what the hell. So, all I can do right now, decide to go into Sandslash, predicting the Sludge Bomb. Do predict correctly, which is good, but I get poisoned, which is bad. So, what can you do? Right now, I believe he actually decides to go for another Sludge Bomb, predicting my Sceptile to come back in. He keeps thinking that this thing will come back in, but I don't care if my Sandslash actually ends up dying right now. So, I think I decide to go for either the Super Fang or the... yeah, I go for the Super Fang. I get the feeling that I missed a Super Fang somewhere along the way because it doesn't have 100% accuracy. But, do a decent amount of damage. That damage, you know, the HP that I cut in half will actually come into play a little bit later. But he's going to go ahead and switch out, decide to go into his Mesprit, and guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep Super Fanging. He probably thought I would go for the Earthquake because it's neutral. Nope, just going to keep Super Fanging until I die. That is definitely the plan here. Does a good chunk to Mesprit. Unfortunately, the only other move I have to attack is Earthquake, so yeah, you can kind of see where this is going. I can keep cutting things in half, but once I get all the way down to 1 HP, that sucks. So, in hindsight, I probably should have Rapid Spun on the next turn just to get rid of the Stealth Rocks. They don't bother me that much, as you'll see in a little bit, but I am left with one. I think I was under the impression that I was going to end up dying anyway, but right here, since I did live, I don't know why I didn't go for the Rapid Spin since he is locked in on Stealth Rock. I think what I wanted to do is bring him to the point where if he tried to switch in the Mesprit, he would die to Stealth Rocks himself. And looking at the amount of HP he has, I'm feeling pretty secure about that. So what I get to do right now, I get to go into my my Magmortar, and he is locked in on Stealth Rock. So if he switches out to take, you know, if he switches out to want to predict my moves, then you know, when it comes back in, it'll die. If it stays in right now, then I get to kill something off, but he gets to switch, you know, he gets the freedom of switching. If I went for Focus Blast, killed off, could have gone into Roselia. If I went for Flamethrower, he could have gone into this. If I went for T-Bolt, he could have gone into Roselia. And then if I went for, I don't know what my HP even is, if it's, I feel like it's Ice, but if it's Ice, he could have gone into this. So between both of those, he's not really giving my Magmortar a lot of breathing room. So the fact, I don't know, it's just kind of messy. And if I had Fire Blast, I probably would have killed it off too. But he Wish Protects. My intent right here is just to get as much damage off with Flamethrower as possible. And then after that, I can go into Sceptile. All I really have right now, you got to keep in mind that the only thing I have left at this point are two Choicers, and there are Entry Hazards. So this is going to be Magmortar's last stand right here. It does end up bothering me a little bit that I'm not able to use my Magmortar more, but it's kind of at a low range of HP anyway. So as long as I can get this thing whittled down a little bit, that's fine. You know, I can live with that. He takes me out, useless crit, whatever. Now here is a pivotal point in the game. If he stayed in on this, then things would have definitely turned out a little bit different. But I think what he decides to do, is he decides to protect to try to gauge what move I'm going to go for. I end up going for the Giga Drain because I recognize that this is my last poke. If I'm going to do anything, it's got to be this. Otherwise, Leaf Storm is just going to get down to the point where it's not going to do enough to Alomomola. And then, he'll Scald, Wish, Protects. He can stall me out of Leaf Storms pretty easy. I only got 8 of them. Giga Drain is the one with the most PP. But since he does switch, and this is Specs, it's going to be a 2-hit KO on this Roselia. I mean, it doesn't do much, but the fact is that he'll die right here, and then he'll take damage here to be able to die on this turn. And as you can see, since Alomomola is the slower one, this thing is out of the way. Specs Giga Drain, Alomomola is a physical wall, I would wager to assume. I don't know what his EVs are, but it's not going to like taking a Giga Drain. So he kind of recognizes that, just decides he doesn't want to Wish Protect anymore, and I end up Giga Draining for the win. But just, to go back on that previous play from earlier, if he protected, stayed in, and then I had just Giga Drained that, from that point, he could have taken me out on the next turn with the Sludge Bomb, leaving that in his favor. So, a little bit of lapse of judgment at the end. Did end up winning me the game, but it just as easily could have gone either way. There was a lot of pressure, and it was probably one of the best games I had at the stream. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. So, if you did, you're welcome to leave a like, rating, comment, subscribe, do your thing. I did make a new deck in TCGO, those of you that are fans of it. Problem is, there are a couple things that are glitched in it. I don't really feel like using it. And then this just all of a sudden just got in my way. Let me close that off for a second. Okay, as you can kind of see, sun's creeping up, just kind of crept up on me. Anyways, it's getting to be around that time, so hope you guys have a good weekend, and I will see you on Monday.